Hello and welcome to Outlook on Air. This podcast is designed to keep you connected with all things Outlook, with special emphasis on our enrichment program and its many activities and services. On this podcast, we'll hear from Outlook associates, donors to our many programs, clients of our services, and much more. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this edition of Outlook on Air. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Outlook on Air during this busy summer season. And we all know that
summer's more fun with the Outlook on Air podcast.
And with all the portable devices out there in the form of like smartphones and tablets and laptops, you name it, you can take us pretty much wherever you want to go. And of course, you can also listen at home on your Alexa and Google devices and all that sort of thing. So hope you have fun and take us along with whatever you're doing all summer long. And of course, if you want to know how to find our podcasts, that's easy too.
You'll find our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Podbean.com, or just ask your phone, tablet, or smart speaker to play the Outlook on Air podcast.
On this podcast, Jill Thomas joins us once again, 1 year to the month that she was actually on for the first time interviewing me, and she's back doing it again. Now, she thought she was going to be on in July, because that's when we thought we were going to first air this. You'll hear her refer to July, but we're actually putting her on in August, 1 year after she was on before. So if you're looking for podcasts about Dennis Nelson, now you can always look to the August podcast for the year 2025 or the year August 2026, and both in the month of August, which I think is just very neat. Well, Jill, it is great to have you back again. My goodness, it's been a whole year. I think it's about a year to the day that you were here.
I know, that's crazy. And it wasn't, I don't think we did that on purpose. It was just a coincidence, happenstance. And I was looking at the calendar and, oh my gosh, it's been a year already. Well, that's crazy.
The nice part is I do believe your podcast is going to actually air in July instead of August.
Okay.
This time around. So I think that's how it's going to work out.
So by this time, probably we've already celebrated the 250th, July 4th. Had a great weekend, I'm sure. Everything was fantastic.
Absolutely. We had our Tee It Up for Sight golf tournament in June.
June 3rd.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, all that kind of stuff has already happened by the time people listen to this.
I was looking at the calendar out front, too, and all the stuff that you guys have coming up, the cornhole tournament. I think, when is that? Is that in July?
I believe so.
So I don't want to mix up everybody because I know I'm talking future tense here, but then the gala also coming up in the fall.
Yeah.
So a lot of fun stuff.
Well, and then of course the big camp for our youth is coming up also in July 19th to the 24th. I remember that much.
So we're not sure if it already happened or if it's just around the corner.
That's right. Yep.
But we're ready.
All kinds of good stuff. Well, listen, before we get, and I assume you have a whole list of questions for me, and I'll eventually shut up here so you can ask them. But before we get to that, I understand that celebration of sorts is in order. Congratulations, because I understand you took a new position.
I did. Working with Walnut Media. Walnut Media, a lot of people know it better as Boomer Radio, even though it's a lot of things, but Boomer Radio is probably the most front-facing for most people. And Boomer Radio has been great, and get to work with Dave Wingert and all the guys. Jack Swanda's there, and Chuck Sturr, and Neil Nelkin, and all these people that have been around Omaha radio and actually the whole state. I mean, they've been around for years. They're kind of the godfathers of radio as it is. And then we've also got the other side of it, which is the part I'm working on, is the podcast division. And getting that up and running as a tool. It's not just podcasts, it's content, honestly. It's like the podcasts have evolved as a way to create content for marketing purposes for small businesses in particular.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's kind of our target audience, to help them out, give them more things to use to tell people who they are and what they do.
Sure. Sure. Awesome. Yeah, I suppose you're working with every type of activity too. I'll bet because I know they have a lot of interest in sports and, the whole gamut.
Yes. Yeah, they're actually very excited because we are future casting this. We'll know more about this in July of where we are right now. But there's some big things in store on AM 590, and that's just a legendary frequency. And you recently acquired that. And so hopefully, as July, it's up and running at this point and getting ready for Husker football.
Thank you for answering one of my questions because I noticed 590 went dark.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is going on? Is anybody going to take it over? It's a wonderful signal. Gets into Plattsmouth where I live very well and all that kind of thing. You just answered a question.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know exactly all the details as to why it was shuttered, but it didn't stay that way very long.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. I'm glad that frequency's coming back. It's been a legendary Omaha frequency.
Yes, and fingers crossed. I know some of the rumors are out there, and we may know the answer already as I speak. I'm not sure because we're working really hard to bring back the same call letters, WOW.
Oh, how nice.
So that's kind of in the hands of the FCC.
Sure.
And they, of course, like to keep the W's on to the east and the K's to the west. As you notice, your call letters, you'll kind of see WW was kind of an anomaly that it was in Omaha. Mm-hmm. And there aren't many radio stations west of the Mississippi that have a W that start their call letters.
No.
And so we're fingers crossed. That's what's working right now as we speak in May that we're working very hard on and should know in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Just shows you, folks, how we prepare for these podcasts. We don't just fling them together. They're done months in advance.
It's true. It is true. And it's so much better to be able to do that. Make sure you've got your stuff put together and not have to rush.
Well, congratulations. That's a major step forward for you. And I'm sure you're happy to be, so engaged, and I'm sure it keeps you going 24/7.
It is. It's a lot of fun. It's just great to be with such an energetic, exciting group of people that are seeing so many things are coming together quickly for that whole group. And it's locally owned, family owned. It's got a live staff, people in the studio all day long. That's another anomaly, sadly, for a lot of radio stations. You don't have the live presence. A lot of people either pre-recorded or they're piped in, so to speak. But they're all right there from Dave Wingert in the morning at 5 o'clock until Neil Nelkin at night. But all day long, you've got live talent that's right there. And they go to parades and they go to events and they engage with the listeners. And that's just a really cool side of it that is missing.
What I like a lot about them is that they have also preserved a lot of the old radio sound.
Yeah. Yes.
I love it.
It makes it so much fun. It really does. It's just it's the traditional style, and some would say it's old school, and I don't care. That's fine. Call it what you want. Yeah. When I started in radio was in the 80s, and I almost missed the golden era. But I fortunately got in on what I call the tail end of it, I guess, because the 70s and 80s was just like earth-shattering, the moves that were made and how exciting things were. And you think about the radio stations that were on then, legendary stations in the 70s and 80s. The 90s was still fun, but things started to change technologically.
Yes.
And that's when you saw a little more of the pre-recorded. And I always hated that word pre-recorded. It's either recorded or it's not. If it's recorded, it is pre.
Exactly.
But it's either, there were things that were recorded or they were just starting to play around with having one person or having a group of people in one city being the jocks for stations across the country.
Automation killed us.
And automation was a big part of it. And I know they did a little bit in the 50s and 60s. They'd send the big reels over that had whole shows already on them. And so you're playing, it's like a tape deck, except for it's the size of, not even a dinner plate, bigger than that, a turkey platter, right?
Absolutely.
Big old reels to put on. So they were kind of toying with that before, but not to the extent that it got to in the 90s and the early 2000s.
And when you were rewinding one of those things, I remember sticking my finger out and bling, and oh man, we have stories.
It's so true, but I'm so glad got to be a part of that and then see the changes as they were just starting to come in with the internet and everything that followed.
Sure, absolutely. I'm going to break into this little interview because there's been some updated information to all of the AM 590 WOW things that Jill has been talking about up to this point. So I thought I would get you up to date as of the actual airing of this podcast. Jill also let it out of the bag that sometimes we record these podcasts months in advance, which normally isn't a problem, but when you're dealing with the fast-moving world of media, sometimes that can get to be an issue, so we need to update you here. As of this airing of this podcast, you can now tune in to AM 590 WOW, and you'll hear Sports Talk Huskers, and that's their little way of talking about it, their little logo that they use, and that's exactly what they are. So the Walnut Media wish came true, and I heard that referred to that way in a publication that I read that follows radio events, a publication called Inside Radio. They published a headline talking about the things Jill has been talking about and laying them out for the average person who follows radio events and that sort of thing, and they called it the Walnut Wish. So I've called it that ever since, and the wish came true for them. They started broadcasting, if you will, on AM 590 WOW with those call letters, and they simulcast Boomer Radio over Father's Day weekend. So for those of us who live in between Boomer's many transmitters and that sort of thing where we can't hear them very well, it was great. I was finally able to hear Neil at night and all these different things that Jill has previously mentioned here, so that was kind of fun. So they began testing, doing a lot of testing behind the scenes and all that kind of thing. And Father's Day weekend, we were actually able to tune in and hear the station, and they went on and off the air several different times up to this point. But then on July 1st, they officially began broadcasting for sure as AM 590 WOW, and even on that Father's Day weekend, they were using those call letters and, of course, talking about AM 590. So I was able to very quickly find out that the Walnut Wish came true, and that is so fantastic. The call letters are back. They're legendary call letters in this area, and glad to see the station is back on the air, and they provide an interesting mix of programming. They have Sports Center and ESPN Radio, which Sports Center is a part of. By the time you are hearing this podcast, you can also tune in from 2 to 6 every afternoon and listen to Handley and Hanson, two folks that take care of afternoons for them and give them a real local feel. So if you're looking for local content and so forth, that's a great time to check them out. Anytime's a good time to listen to AM 590 WOW. Of course, I would say that even if I worked there, so why not? And they are on the air, and the wish did come true for them, and we're so happy for them, and they're doing a great job of presenting Sports Talk Huskers, and that's really good news, especially for a lot of you who I know are Husker volleyball fans. That's the frequency you want to remember if you're looking for radio coverage of really anything Huskers, but I know we have an awful lot of Husker volleyball, girls volleyball fans that really get into that during the winter months, and that's the station that you're going to want to tune to if you want to hear the radio coverage, because previous to that you could watch it, of course, but nothing like hearing the radio coverage. So that's the place now to get it if you just want to listen on the radio, and a lot of other great programming there, and they're doing a great job of providing that programming on such a legendary frequency. So did want to break into the original interview to update you and let you know that the station is on the air now. You can tune to 590 and you'll actually hear something. So I wanted to pass that along. I will now return you to the original interview. Well, like I say, I know how this went last time. You had a whole raft of questions for me. You've probably done the same type of thing this time, so I should probably let you take over the podcast. And just like last time, you'll leave and you won't do any of the editing. But
Nope.
I'll try to live through that too.
Right? I know. If this is the first time somebody's hearing you you, I think that really a little of your history is worth retracing, and how you got to where you are, and I think it's a pretty cool story.
Well, I appreciate that, and glad you think it's a cool story. And it is. There's a lot of cool things about it, and I have found out in subsequent interviews that we've done since that I am not the only one, which is always nice. We just had an author on in June that wrote a book about being a visually impaired parent, having two-sighted children and raising them all on her own with the help of her visually impaired husband. So that was quite an interview that people enjoyed in June. So anyway, yeah, my story. Well, I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1958, and it almost immediately was put up for adoption. I think they just kind of wanted to see what came out, and from there they said, get rid of that thing and get it adopted or something. I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know how it exactly went, but anyway, they put me up for adoption almost immediately, and my mother was from Wisconsin, so I got turned over to the state of Wisconsin pretty quickly. I know I was born at St. Paul Ramsey Hospital in St. Paul, Minnesota, on January 13th of 1958, and then from there I eventually ended up in a foster home in Sauk City, Wisconsin, a little town near Madison, Wisconsin, for anybody familiar with that geography. Mm-hmm. And then from there, my parents, who ended up adopting me, and I consider these folks to be my parents, Stan and Mary Nelson, really became my parents, and they adopted me when I was 3.5 years old. So there was some time in between where I was living in this foster home in Sauk City until then. So, and from there, I went on, and the thing about Stan and Mary Nelson, my parents, is that they were visually impaired themselves. My mother lost her sight due to glaucoma, and my dad was what we call a high partial. He had quite a bit of usable vision, but not enough to drive and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So he certainly was able to see when I was, trying to get away with something or something.
That's funny.
He saw just enough sometimes,
That's funny. Were there brothers and sisters?
We did eventually adopt my sister. That was another 2 years later. We adopted my sister, and she lives with me now here in Plattsmouth, where I live. And so that has worked out quite well. It's kind of a small world. I didn't expect it to ever go that way, but it did. Mm-hmm. And so that makes for an interesting way and helps me get around, and some of that kind of stuff kind of falls into play as well. Of course, then I went on to the Wisconsin School for the Visually Handicapped, which happened to be in the same town that I grew up in, because eventually I moved from that foster home to Janesville, Wisconsin, which is right near the Illinois border. The next town to it would be Beloit, Wisconsin, so that tells you how close we're getting to the Illinois border if you look at a map. And so I went to the Wisconsin School for the Visually Handicapped in Janesville, so I was one of those town kids. We talked about that in our last interview with one of the townies.
Right? There's the country mouse and the city mouse. Kind of the townie kids, they all got in trouble because they hang out all day long, making trouble for everybody else, and then have to get home by supper.
Well, and the thing is, we knew the town, so we could always help the kids that lived at the school that came from other parts of the state. See, we could help them get away with stuff because we knew the place.
First we can help them, and then it was we can help them get away with stuff.
Exactly.
I get it. Okay.
There you go. But somehow we got through all of that, and I graduated, and then I went on to do all kinds of things. My parents, of course, wanted me to go to college and probably be some fancy doctor or lawyer or something like that, and that just was not my thing, but I did attend 2 years at the UW Stevens Point, and I did not graduate because I just knew college wasn't my thing. And as it was, I got more involved in the radio scene up in that neck of the woods than I did in college. My radio career started in high school. and started with things like running the school radio station. Yes, we had one. And then working some odd jobs at several radio stations around the area and, making the big money. Not really.
Right. I was surprised when I found out people in radio got paid.
I know. You told me. You told that story, which is amazing. And like I told you at the time, I said, I not only knew that they got paid, but I wanted to, make the kind of pay that I knew some of them were getting.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
That was the hard part, is getting to that point, or at least somewhere close.
Right, somewhere livable.
Yeah, something like that. Or I could actually go pay the power bill and say the radio station gave me the money for this.
Right. Yeah, that makes it sweet, because it is kind of a neat marriage of a great hobby, something you absolutely love to do, but then it turns into something that helps you live your life.
Sure.
And it's like, that's a sweet thing when that happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Any part of the story that you would like to hear more about at this point?
You keep going. I've got questions in my head, so I'm keeping. I'm keeping track.
Okay. All right. Well. All right. So eventually, I left the UW Stevens Point. Did a bunch of other jobs as well. I ran a coffee shop in Milwaukee. I'm trying to remember everything. I had it all pretty well memorized when I did the last podcast, because it was our first time meeting, and of course, you know how that goes. But I did run a coffee shop for a period of time, but my partner was not totally honest, and unfortunately took a lot of the profits, and that became a big mess, and we went through a whole bankruptcy thing, and it was really nasty.
Oh.
We will kind of skip that part. But,
yeah.
And I worked in cable television. I worked in Minneapolis. I eventually moved to Minneapolis and worked in cable television at what started out as being Rogers Cable, owned by a Canadian firm. Rogers Cable TV was very, very big in Canada at the time, and they had some U.S. holdings, and we were one of them. They changed names a number of different times. After that, I worked for several of their whatever came from them. I can't think of the big word I wanted to use, but several of the entities that followed, I was a part of as well. Did everything there from being a receptionist, of all things, to customer service, and a lot of little things in between, and was there for many, many years. A good, I want to say 13 years,
wow.
I believe I was at that cable company, and that's a long time.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people. I had a few cohorts that were there as long, but the turnover was pretty heavy in a place like that, as you can imagine, unless you were in management or something.
Right.
But, so I did that. Of course, I always had a yen to get into radio, and started that in 1970. Well, I really started, as I said, in high school, and kind of worked the odd jobs where I could get them and things, but I started getting more and more serious about it in about 1978, and did a bunch of training with a real good friend of mine who worked in the business, and wanted to see me make it as well, and so I worked a lot with him, sent out tons and tons and tons at the time of tapes, which they don't do anymore, but we would send out hundreds of tapes all over the place. Eventually that helped me get a job in Antigo, Wisconsin, a little town in the northeast part of the state. And I worked for WATK, WRLO up there after doing some things for WSPT, WXYQ, Stevens Point. And then there was a big gap, which often happens in broadcasting. Sometimes you can go for quite a drought, where I was always trying to get work. But I ended up getting a job eventually in Moultrie, Georgia, which was the best job in the industry that I had, working for WMTM, or as we commonly called it, Cruisin' 94, playing classic hits from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Now, when I first got there, they were only playing things from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. So we changed some of that.
And it did. It's interesting is that the word classic, I saw an article the other day about it in one of the trade magazines, and they were talking about how it's kind of being pushed aside as opposed to classic, because really that era there was rock music.
Yeah.
There was different types and styles of music, and they're kind of leaning into those instead of calling it classic, because it really doesn't define it anymore. And honestly, I used to think about when I was in school, we'd have like classic music was the 50s, the 50s. And I'm thinking, well, that was just the 70s. So that was only 20 years ago.
Yeah.
They were calling it classic music. And then you're in the 90s and they're calling the 70s classic. I'm like, no, that's not classic. What are you talking about? That was the best rock music ever.
There you go.
But I think they're kind of realizing that it's hard to keep rebranding the music because they have to keep expanding the tent.
Yeah.
So to include the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s are now all considered a classic by that definition. So that's gonna change. But whenever anybody does say classic, I always think 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
That's what I think of.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
But also another term that comes to mind that I know program directors cringe at even now is oldies, because that's even more stereotyping. And my program director at Cruisin' 94 hated when I would slip and say oldies radio. He just hated that. But
that's funny, wasn't it? Was it Russell Simmons who was the exercise guy, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Didn't he do something, Dancing to the Oldies or something like that? I mean, he made millions of dollars doing that.
Yeah. I don't think you're going to tell him to change it. No.
Yeah. Anything he did. And that's a whole nother story because his life is interesting as all get out. But when he did his thing in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, probably 80s and 90s was when he was really dancing to the oldies. And it was kind of interesting. So I saw, this is totally a side note, but I saw a story about him a while back, and they were comparing him to the other big exercise guru, which was Jane Fonda.
Oh, yes, of course.
Right, at the time, Jane Fonda had all the perfect dancers that had the beautiful bodies and looked wonderful. And Mr. Simmons, he invited the audience to come up and be his dancers.
Yeah.
All different sizes and shapes of people because he wanted everybody to be healthy.
And it was an interesting approach, too.
It really was.
Yeah.
It really was. But it just made me think, swinging to the oldies or something like that. Yeah, the oldies. Yes, that's very stereotypical.
Yeah. So my program director didn't like that word. We didn't use oldies. It was all classic hits. That's what he wanted to be known as.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
But words matter, though. Those little things that subconsciously that they have you do, or as far as being on the air, that you can call it this, don't call it that, or you can push it this way, but don't say this, because it does matter in how the station's perceived.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's something that you learn early on in broadcasting, is that no matter who you work for, they have their own set of rules, their own way of doing things, and the approach matters across the board.
Yeah.
Exactly. The board.
Exactly. Oh, that's crazy. Yeah. Well, that was okay. So that was what year was that when you were there?
I was there. I started Halloween, as a matter of fact, of 2006. 2006, I started at Cruisin' 94 and worked there through February 24th, was it? 23rd or 24th. It was what was the last day? I think it was Thursday. It was a Thursday of 2017.
Wow.
So quite a long time. And that's when I made the big move and came to Outlook, Nebraska, and moved here. That's kind of a story in and of itself. But then I ended up in IT, working and being an IT assistant, helping out with IT and things of that sort. And that lasted through 2019. Then there was a little gap. And then I came back and did training for our training department for 2 years, and then they offered me this position, and here I am, and life is good.
Yeah. Go back to how you did end up at Outlook. I mean, that's because seriously, you had two runs at the first run and then the second one, right, at Outlook. But just kind of how you even found out about it. What got you this far south?
Well, this far south. Yes, ma'am. I knew a guy. His name is Mitch Green, and a lot of people are smiling because they know Mitch, of course, from our IT department now. But Mitch and I worked together at Freedom Scientific. Oh, how could I forget that job? I worked at Freedom Scientific for a number of years as well in my story. Boy, this story is a little more disjointed than the last time, but I did work there, and so did Mitch, and we became very, very good friends. I think because we were from the same part of the country, and he gravitated very quickly to someone like me, being at Freedom Scientific, which is located in St. Pete, Florida, or at least they were at that time. They still are, but they have a lot of different headquarters and have undergone a lot of changes. So most of the people now are working remotely from all over the country now. But at the time, we were pretty much headquartered in St. Pete. And so Mitch and I met and did a lot of things in Florida and worked together and had a great time. And I got a lot of my computer knowledge by working at Freedom Scientific. And then we parted ways, and I, of course, got the Cruisin' 94 job and was working there, doing my thing, and I felt that I had pretty much exhausted it was going to pretty much be the same old thing after a while, even though I loved it, and even though I figured that's probably what I would do for the rest of my life. Mitch came along, and he said, hey, I've always had you in mind. If anything ever opened up at Outlook and something did, I needed an assistant, and I thought of you right away. So I said, wow, that is very cool. So that's how I came to be here. I, obviously had to go through the interview process and interviewed with Mark Pluchek, our human resources director, and all that kind of stuff that everybody that works here does. And then they talked me into moving up here and giving up all the radio stuff and everything. And I knew that's what would happen when I moved. I knew that was coming. And I said, IT would be exciting. It's something I've always been interested in, obviously, and this would be a chance to really, up my knowledge level in that area and all that kind of thing. So did all that, and that's how I came to Outlook, was through Mitch Green getting me here initially.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
Wow.
Weird the changes that life can put you through.
It really is. It really is. And when you came here, then your sister came with you.
No, not at all.
Okay.
She was still living in Georgia. She stayed in Georgia another 2 or 3 years, actually, after I moved here. Even, let's see, gosh, it might have even been 4 years that she stayed in Georgia after I left. But then she moved up here as well. That was very good because we got her moved just before COVID. I mean, a week before COVID started to become a thing and you really needed to pay attention to it. We got her out of, because I just can't picture her having stayed down there alone, all by herself down in Georgia. And Georgia for me was a job, but for her it was a place to move at that particular point. She had no desire to necessarily be in Georgia. She liked it and thrived very well there, but didn't have a desire. I did, because I wanted to work for that radio station, of course. So, a little different situation. So I kind of wanted to get her out of there as soon as I could and get her somewhere, that she was more familiar with, whether it be back in Wisconsin where we grew up or here. And this was the best option at the time. And she took advantage of it. So she's enjoying her life in Plattsmouth as well. So
that's nice. That's nice. I like Plattsmouth.
I like it
a lot. I lived down there for a few years.
Did you?
Yeah.
Nice place.
It really, really is. That's cool. That's interesting. You start thinking about all the twists and turns that got you where you are, and that any one of those had ended differently, you might not be sitting in the chair you're sitting in.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah. I think about that too. Look back and it's kind of crazy what led me to move from whatever location to the next one, that had I not, and sometimes there's a little bit of reminiscing, and you kind of think, oh gosh, if only I'd stayed in that. I really liked that one job that I had, but then all this wouldn't have happened.
Right. Oh, you go through that anytime you change jobs, you go through that.
Yeah, you absolutely do. So as for you now, what's on the horizon for you now?
Well, I am pretty much semi-retired. I mean, this is kind of...
That's not a bad place to be.
No, I like it. I like it. I am 68 years old, which anybody has probably already figured out when I told my birthday in the beginning of this, so I'm not worried about it. I'm 68 years old, and I pretty much feel I've done everything, and I've also had a lot of health issues fairly recently. They're not real severe, but they're enough that, when you're, 8 hours a day in the grind and then coming up from Plattsmouth, I mean, it gets to be a grind after a while.
Right.
And anybody would tell you that. And I don't know. I'm not sure what my future really is. I'm loving doing these podcasts, to be totally honest with you. I love coming in here. I love the fact that Outlook thinks enough of me that they kept me on board.
Yeah.
Because they could have very easily said, see you later.
I don't think that was in the cards.
Well,
everything I've heard from everybody here, that was definitely not something that was in the cards. It was more of a, we hope he still wants to come around. Kind of, and make sure that you're still part of the family.
Well, and I definitely appreciate it, and I notice it every time I come back, and so many people are actually almost, at least they're pretending real well, to be glad to see me and stuff.
So are you kind of like the godfather around here?
I guess so. In my own weird way. I didn't set out to do that or be that, but I think in some weird ways you could almost get away with saying that.
Yeah, that's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. It makes it easier for the new people that are coming on to know who to go kind of hang out with, and if they could have some time with you, they'd learn a lot.
Sure. Well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Depending on my mood that day.
Depends on what I want to share.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fantastic. Okay, so I do have a question for you.
Okay.
I think about it because I'm thinking just a compare and contrast of my radio history and your radio history, because there are a lot of parallels. Majority of my time was in a team situation where I was working on a morning show, and so I did have several years where I was the only person in the studio, but the majority of the past, the latest years, was working as a team, and that was in 3 different locations, 3 different partners. But when you're working in radio, this was also before they had cameras in studios. Yeah. I'm going to point that out too. I was never a fan of when they started putting cameras in studios, because it kind of, to me, broke the fourth wall.
Right.
And when I say the fourth wall, it's like this what's going on behind the curtain, because that's part of that theater that's in everybody's head, and they paint the picture with the words that you're using. But I do a lot of hand gesturing. I do a lot of movements, and probably to a fault. And so when I talk, I use my hands a lot to talk, but also we used our hands or other ways to communicate to each other without saying things out loud when we wanted to either take the next caller or take a break, or don't forget to, make this announcement or something like that. How did you handle that? Or did that? I'm sure it came up, because it comes up for everybody.
Sure.
How was that handled?
Well, an interesting question. I'm so glad you thought of it and asked it. I actually handled it quite well, considering how we did it. I had wonderful people. Of course, like you, I like being in the studio by myself. And if given my own druthers and things, I would, always opt for let me just go in the studio and do my thing. But sometimes you did have to work either like morning shows. I did a morning newscast with several people, and we did have to do that kind of communication that you talk about. And of course, in the sighted world, that is, hand gestures and things are just a part of life anyway. It's just something you don't even think about. But especially to a totally blind person such as myself, it was a little bit to get used to. So what we did, when I got in those situations, I had to host, as I mentioned, a morning news program with other people. And I got those people essentially trained to use their voices to indicate when certain things were going to happen. And again, this wasn't a real complicated, this is not like News Radio 780 WBBM in Chicago or something. This was a little, that was the Antigo station, as a matter of fact. And so it was pretty easy to do. And I would have the people do different things with their voices. When they finished a story, I would have them finish the story. Maybe not
Very good.
quite that obvious, but close enough that I would know they were done. So then I knew to open my big mouth and say something, and I better say something that they would know exactly what to respond to. It took them probably more getting used to it than me. But I did. I said, I obviously can't see you, when you wave your hand or say, make that frantic gesture to me. So you're going to have to do something with your voice, or the other things that we would do sometimes, occasionally cut the mic and they would say something quickly to me. And we had a system where it would come through my headset.
Okay.
And so that helped. But that's how we got around things like that. And then as quickly as I could, I'd dash off to a studio and do my own shift as quick as I could.
Get me out of here. Get me out of here.
Exactly.
That's really interesting, though, because it's akin to being on the phone with somebody, except you've got people listening to you.
Right.
And you don't want to walk over each other.
Right, exactly. Especially on a show like that, because it was like, we would even, trade off stories. I'd be reading one in Braille, they'd be reading something off the wire, that kind of thing. And you want those transitions to be smooth and as you say, not stumbling all over each other and wondering who's going to say what when and all that kind of stuff. And you had to do it without a lot of pauses. And it was awkward at first. It wasn't perfect in the beginning, but we got it down to a science.
And it's seriously very effective because it wasn't clumsy. It was just different. It was just like, this is a different approach. And everybody had to relearn the cue.
Yeah. And I had a guy, one of the guys I worked with told me, his name was Lauren Haraldson. He said, I still made the gestures, by God.
I imagine so.
And I'm sure he did. I laughed. I said, yeah, I'm sure you did. I'm sure you do. And I don't want you to stop because that's what you're used to. But I said, I never saw one of them.
Yeah, sorry. I missed that part. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because the adaptations aren't that wild. The adaptations make perfect sense. And like the phone call as compared to sitting in the same room with somebody, using your voice to let somebody know that you're done, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Did the same thing in college when I hosted the program Two-Way Radio, which was a talk show. And I did work at the college radio station way back when, too, of course, and did the same kind of thing there where you were talking about callers, because that was what the show pretty much was callers. So they'd have to tell me call on line 2 or something like that. And they knew when to insert things like that. And there were times when they did have to say something, so I'd know, what line, because they can't hold up 3 fingers or 2 fingers.
Sure.
So they had to but they always knew when to do it. They got really good at knowing when I dropped my voice and sounded like I was done, then shut up so they can say, and we have another caller on line 2 or something like that.
Right.
And I'd say, great, let's go ahead and take that, or whatever it was at the time. I'm obviously making it up now, but at the time I knew what to say.
Yeah, That's interesting, and to be able to do it, and I guarantee you, most people, seamless to them, they didn't know what was going on at all. Had no idea.
No, listeners had no idea. We never talked about it very much. And it was one of those unspoken things, but I taught the staff at several radio stations how to do it and how to do it well, and we practiced. Yeah, I do remember one time in a staff meeting, we actually practiced doing it in the beginning.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
It does. You came up with that yourself? Was that something that had evolved over time?
I came up with it because I figured I have to find some common ground if I'm going to do this news thing. How am I going to know when the other guy is done? How am I going to know when he's really finished? And we had a couple of incidents where we stepped on each other. I mean, because we're human, it's going to happen once in a blue moon, but it was thanks to me and coming up with that idea. It was very, very seldom and pretty much, transparent to the listener.
Yeah. Yeah, I imagine those almost became, what do I want to call them, out cues that were not predictable to you. Well, they were predictable to you. It was like you knew what the out cue was.
Right.
Whereas, and they do it, they still use out cues for that matter. You hear it on like the Husker ball games.
Yes.
In Nebraska, or the Big Red Network.
Absolutely.
Or Husker football. And that's the cue. That phrase means go to the next element.
That's right. Because again, many cases they're miles away from the studio and people that are controlling things, so they have to do that kind of stuff.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Even though it's, I guess you could call it a blind issue of sorts, it is something that you have to deal with, and that was what I also told people at the radio stations. Just think of yourself as being on a remote broadcast somewhere where you can't see the person.
Yes. And that's universal.
Yeah.
Everybody's going to be there sooner or later in that position. There's going to come a day.
Right. Exactly. So that was one area I wanted to make sure we definitely covered. So I'm so glad you did.
No, absolutely. And it's interesting because that's the kind of stuff, though, that people learn at Outlook, too. The workarounds, which aren't necessarily exclusive to people who don't have their site, but they're useful. It's like, well, wait, we can take that and put that to work over here.
Right. It's all about adapting.
Yes.
Yeah. And we did it in the broadcast business, and certainly here at Outlook, we do it all the time. You're absolutely right about that.
That's awesome. That's great. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed another fantastic conversation with you.
And same here. I could do it all day long, but something about getting back to work, at least in my case, is probably imminent. And since you're not going to do my editing, I guess I'll let you go. Thank you so much for coming by again and being willing to do it. This is probably our last one. And, it's just been so much fun. You never know. Maybe our paths will cross again. I certainly hope so.
I do. I hope so, too, because this has been thoroughly my honor, my privilege to come in. And I thank you so much for the invitation.
Well, when we had Jill on last time, I spent the time after Jill interviewed me showing you samples of my broadcasting career. So why not throw one more in? This won't be nearly as long, not even close, but it's kind of fun. One of the things I miss about broadcasting was my ability to create a bit or promo or whatever in the morning and have it on the air later that day. And this is one such case. 2011 was the year, and it was my birthday, January 13th. I ran this promo in the afternoon, and this is what it sounded like when I ran it for the first time in 2011. We ran the bit in differing versions. I made several versions of this little bit and ran it successive years, but this is what it sounded like when we ran it for the first time in the year 2011, January 13th. Classic Hits, Cruising 94. Good afternoon. It's the Chuck Nelson thing for a Tuesday afternoon. It's a pleasure to have your company. 11 now past 3. And I don't know what's going on around here. All kinds of people. I think every staff member that has ever been at WMTM is packed into this studio, and we don't have enough chairs for everybody or anything. What in the world is going on? What do you people want?
Happy birthday to you.
Oh, that's nice.
You belong in a zoo.
What?
With the monkeys and tigers.
That's not very nice.
They look just like you.
Oh, well, thanks a lot, I think, guys. I feel the love from here. By the way, don't let the door hit you on the way out. I absolutely loved doing those little bits, and sometimes you could do humorous things like that and didn't have to run it by anyone or anything. Once in a while, you had to do that with certain types of things you were doing, but this one I was just able to come up with on my own, and it was on the air, as I say, later that day. I did it in my home studio and had it on the air. That was a lot of fun. I do miss that aspect of broadcasting. Well, folks, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this edition of Outlook on Air, but we certainly hope you've enjoyed the program. We hope to see you back here again for another edition of Outlook on Air. And if you'd like more information about Outlook Enrichment, or anything Outlook for that matter, make sure you visit our website at www.outlooken.org. That's www.outlooken.org. Or you can always call us for more information or to schedule any kind of an appointment at area code 531-365-5051. That's area code 531-365-5051. 51. And don't forget to subscribe to our monthly newsletter so that you can find out when the next podcast is available. And we hope to see you then on the next edition of Outlook on Air.